Hello, Alana. How are you
Hi,
today on this
I'm doing
beautiful,
well.
beautiful Saturday morning for you and Saturday afternoon for myself?
Yes. Yeah, I know. We're like half a world away, but we're here. It's nice.
I know we both got toddlers, boys.
I know. The struggle is real. Working
It,
mom status is real.
oh, honestly, juggling, which I know a lot of mums out there are, and uh, it's empowerment, right? Empowerment to the people. I
Yeah,
mean,
and you know what I always say, my son is seeing a strong working woman, and that makes it worth it. So
it does, doesn't it? Yeah, because we're a fit girl.
yeah.
So okay, so this is obviously going to be a joint episode for everybody out there. Alana has her own podcast show. If you like to talk about that.
Sure. So the business itself is Freedom with Food and Fitness, which is on Instagram, Facebook, and I'm relaunching the podcast, which is called Finally Free in January, and it's everywhere
Nice.
podcasts are. I just wrote a book about intuitive eating, trying to get a publisher. So if anyone's out there who's a publisher or literary agent, hi, I'm here. I have something for you. It's so
Oh,
hard. It's harder than writing the book. I swear.
oh, it
It's so
is.
competitive,
It's so yeah, because I had Mary D. Muff was my guest this week. Actually, she's a literary agent, and we were talking about that on our episode. She has
Yeah.
40 books published, and she said that the average amount of books that like a self-published author will ever sell is like 200 to 300, whereas if it's published these days, you're talking probably 4,000 or 5,000 copies because there's so many books, so much out there, right?
And they want you to have a big platform. They're like, well, you need like at least 10,000 followers. I was like, cool, I have almost 1,000. See you soon. But it's okay, because I love growing the community. I love talking to
Mm,
everybody who's been through what I've been through, this disordered
yeah.
eating, and they're looking for intuitive eating, and like I would love to help them get there.
Oh wow, absolutely, and it shows in your mission of helping survivors. I mean, it'll be great for you to talk about your life journey as to where you've come from to where you are today.
Yeah. So I actually haven't experienced any sexual trauma myself, but
Mm.
I was somebody who grew up with a lot of external validation, like, oh, you're smart and you're like conventionally cute as a little kid, and like, good job, good
Yeah.
job, good job. And that's wonderful. But if you hear that enough, you start to crave it, and you don't ever
Mm.
develop any internal validation. So you're
Yeah.
just seeking other people's approval, and it can get twisted in this crazy way. And after I finished graduate school, I didn't know what I was going to do. Like, I didn't know if I was going to find a job. I didn't know where I was going to live, and I felt out of control of my life for the first time.
Yeah.
And because I had no control, I sought control over food and my body,
Okay.
and it grew a life of its own. And like, literally my goal at times was to be the thinnest I possibly could, for no other reason than to just see the number below.
Russia.
I know, it's
Oh my
insane.
God.
It's insane.
Yeah.
And that was for a good 5 years. I was eating under 1,000 calories a day.
Oh
I was
goodness.
like in a constant brain fog. I had lethargy. I was like, I feel like I was going through quicksand in my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And then, I found intuitive eating, and, you get, and I mean, our listeners can hear this. You get to a point where you're just like, I can't do this anymore. There
Yeah.
has to be something else. And
Yeah.
then I found intuitive eating, and I slowly, I went through phases of other diets that were at least like, I went on a diet where I was at least eating a more appropriate amount of food, but it was still a diet. But that was like an intermediate step. And then I finally stopped weighing
Yeah.
myself, and I stopped counting calories. And so like little by little, I freed myself, which is awesome. But
Yeah.
like you said, and I see it with some of my, the people in my community too, is
Mm.
a lot of it could be trauma related.
It is, and it's interesting that we talk about trauma because for those of your listeners who may be listening to this, I do come from a history of sexual abuse, so I suffered from significant trauma, and that's what led to my eating disorder, which was for me it was the opposite. I was overeating because it was my compensation, it was my comfort. you know, that I had, and my security blanket, you know. And just, it was normally in the evenings when I just couldn't sleep because I just needed to eat.
Right.
And then oh my God, my dress size went up 2 sizes, and then that made me feel even worse because I was ugly. I looked ugly and I felt ugly. And yeah, it's just a horrible, vicious cycle of darkness. And honestly, for any survivor out there who is currently in this situation, I obviously understand, you know, what you're going through. And, you know, and this is one of the reasons why I've created my podcast show, is to actually help support you all, which, you know, I hope that you can obviously find it of value. And, you know, please do get in touch with myself or you, Alana, now. Now that Alana's on the scene, you know, because we can help you. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I think it's so important to note too that, you know, you said you were up 2 dress sizes, and whatever size you were would be a fine size for you if that was naturally your size, but
Yeah.
it was your relationship with food based on the trauma that was the
Yeah.
issue, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So would you be willing to talk about what was the trauma that you experienced?
Sure, yeah. So with me, it started at a very young age of 3, when, you know, my whole security, you know, within myself had been taken away from me because I was abused by a man who actually lived inside our home. So he was actually renting a room, and it went on for many, many years. And it was only kind of when I realized that this isn't really right, it doesn't feel right, that I finally told my auntie, because I felt ashamed to talk about it with my parents. Obviously, there was a lot of cultural implications there, being from an Indian background as well, where stuff like this wasn't really spoken about. You know, we hardly ever communicated any emotion, never mind something as tragic as this. And it did, you know, that kind of that man, he impacted the rest of my life, because from then, not only did I have eating disorders, I struggled in relationships, I struggled with trusting people, and I even struggled with my own self-worth. And I lost a lot of respect for my own body, which meant I'd become a bit of a nympho as well in my late teens and in my early adulthood, where I was just sleeping around. You know, I just had no love for myself, and I was just giving myself like I was an object, because that's what I thought I was, just a piece of object. And I knew that, well, at the time I knew that my life was going to be short-lived, because a few attempts of suicide were mainly kind of drug related, where I'd overdose on drugs. And, you know, that led me to wanting to jump off a few buildings a few times, where each time I was saved by my friends. You know, thank God, my friends, my angels, whoever, you know, my guides who were sent there to save me. So trauma it just eats away at you. And I know sometimes as well, for a lot of people, they might not even realize that they've been affected by any trauma, because trauma it's not even around abuse, you know, it's even if you're being abandoned or neglected as a child, that can lead to trauma.
Oh yeah, there's something to be said about, you know, a lot of people will say, well, you know, eating disorders can be caused by trauma, but you know, I haven't been through any trauma. I was never sexually abused, or no one ever hit me and blah. But it's like there's big T trauma and there's little T trauma.
Yeah.
And anything that disrupts your emotional state can be considered a trauma. So it might not have been this big event, but it could
Yeah.
be these like almost like microaggressions or micro events
Yeah.
or little traumas that
Mm,
build up.
absolutely. And for you, because what do you think it was with you then?
Um, you know, it was I honestly I just think it was the need for validation.
Okay.
I think it was
Interesting.
I needed a pat on the back, and I had felt that being thin was something that people patted me and other people in society
Right.
on the back for. And it's like, I
Okay.
need to maintain this. I need to maintain this part of my identity. Even though
Yeah.
I had other things in my life that I excelled at and was good at, like
Yeah.
I wanted it to be this thing. And, you know, I
Yeah.
grew up in a household where, you know, women were supposed to look a certain way and
Mm,
weigh a certain way.
okay.
And that that comes up a lot as well.
It does. Do you have any sisters as well?
I do. It's interesting. I
Ah,
do, but we share the same father, not the same mother. So
okay.
she's a lot older than I am. So she never lived with me. So I never had her as an influence.
Right,
So I was more
okay.
of an only child, but I think that can kind of contribute it to it too,
Yeah,
because I felt like all eyes were always on me.
interesting.
It's
And
like that pressure.
yeah, I was going to say, and like all these size zero models growing up, they, that was a massive thing in magazines. So thank God it's changing now, because you see
Yes.
so many more curves and big bombs are in now, aren't they? And it's like, yeah,
Yay.
yay, finally we can eat.
Yay. I in preparation for this talk, I was
Mm,
looking at some statistics because I know you're in London, and the statistic was in England and Wales in 2017, 20% of women and 4% of men have experienced some type of sexual assault since the age of
wow.
16. So that's 33.4 million female and
Mm,
631,000 female. Or male victims. And then in the
wow.
US, since that's where I am, it says every 68 seconds, another American is sexually assaulted. About 3% of American men have experienced an attempt or completed attempted rape in their lifetime. So
Wow.
those are like huge numbers to me. Does that sound
Crazy.
accurate to you? Do you think that's underrepresented?
I think so, because I always think, like, with statistics, it's all the reported cases. How about all of the unreported cases? All of the people like me who were ashamed to speak up,
Right.
and the ones who have struggled later on in their lives, because there's so many, especially, again, it's very cultural related, this. Many parts of the country, like India, that's where my family originate from. It's a shameful act, and nobody will speak up, because the government are not that hot on even pressing charges, because it's just so normalized. And this is one of the reasons as well why I wanted to write my book and to create this podcast, was to raise the awareness, especially
Right.
in places like India, for the victims out there to speak up
Right.
and to
Can
not
you talk
suffer.
a little bit about your book?
Oh yeah, so victim to victor. So it is literally my life. So the first, well, it's separated out into 4 books. So the first part is a memoir, and then kind of just goes on about how traveling really helped me to heal, and just spirituality as well. It can get quite hard hitting, so definitely not for the faint-hearted. But I had to be real, I had to just get it out there, because that was part of my healing as well, was writing it. And then the second part is it goes on about all of the methods and the techniques which I use to help me to heal. And then it goes on to, kind of more scientific terms of what abuse and trauma actually is, just to educate you all. And then the fourth part is about just decision making, and the fact that, we can decide to keep struggling or to take action and to change our life around, because it's never too late. We can always change our life around. We don't have to suffer in silence.
Right. And just because you've been in this, same situation with disordered eating or with abuse for 5, 10, 20 years doesn't mean
Mm,
you can't turn it around. Like
yeah.
I speak on my platform that it took one day for me.
Wow.
Like
Did it?
I'd been researching and trying and failing and then one day I woke up and I was like, I'm not going to get on the scale today. I'm just going to see what
Eh?
happens. And then like
Lovely.
the end of the day came and I was like, oh, actually, like I have no desire to go on it. Like that was actually fine. Like I didn't explode, nothing bad happened.
Wow.
I'm gonna do it again tomorrow. And then I could do doing same thing with calorie counting. I was always like so afraid to let go of that control because it kept me in, whatever, kept me in
Yeah.
line. And then one day
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just gonna eat today. I'm just gonna see what happens. And it was fine. And nothing bad
Oh
happened.
my
And then
goodness.
weeks went by and I was still fine. So
Yeah.
I think it's the fear of what will be is
Yeah.
actually scarier than the thing itself.
Wow. And it's that decision making. You made that decision. You were like, no more.
Yeah,
I'm going to change my life.
yeah, for sure.
Wow. And I guess it's the same with, addiction. With addiction, really the only way is to go cold turkey. And a lot of people struggle with that, because, like you said, they're scared of the unknown. Oh my God, what's going to happen if I don't take that
And that's totally valid. It's just that your desire and your drive to heal has to be greater than your desire to stay where you are.
Yeah, it is. Oh my God, you hit the nail on the head. It's having that desire to change. Yeah, it's wanting to change, and
Yes.
it's kind of seeing your life once it has changed, and that's where we go on into visualization.
Yes.
Yeah, so important.
That's a good strategy. Do you want to talk a little bit about visualization as a coping strategy?
For sure, yeah. And again, I talk about this a lot in my book because I'm a big believer on visualization. Thing is, if you can't visualize your life how you want it to be, how is your life going to ever turn out how you want it to be? Yeah, you have to actually imagine yourself being who you want to be right now, or whenever you want it in the future. This is why vision boards are really effective, or just kind of having faith, asking God on a daily basis, and also just having that belief in yourself
Yeah.
to to want to change. So it's huge. And I know a lot of people they practice religion, which is great as well, because that's whatever faith you want to practice, then it's about just asking Allah, asking Jesus, asking Buddha, whoever it is. Just ask them to obviously make you whoever you want to be.
Right. Now, we were just talking, I just want to switch the conversation a little bit. We were talking about how we have these incredible statistics and it's probably underreported. As someone who has been there,
Yeah.
what are some of the signs of either sexual, emotional, mental abuse
Mm.
for loved ones to be on the lookout for?
So the biggest one, which I struggled with from personal experience, was being submissive and not communicating. So it's actually a technique of avoidance. A lot of people who are struggling from trauma and even post-traumatic stress disorder, they avoid people, they avoid situations, they just avoid communication. And I guess anybody who's being submissive right now, just kind of, in your family, maybe just try and spend some time with them, because what they want really is somebody who they can trust. And that's something that a lot of survivors don't have. They don't have trust. They can't trust anybody. And it's about being that person who they can trust, being compassionate, being empathetic. That's huge. And that's something that I wish I had when I was younger. I couldn't trust anybody.
Okay, so kind of keeping the door open for somebody to
Mm,
talk to you.
exactly. And then you've got the other traumatic survivors who may even get angry. They'll get very angry. Yeah, so it's the other end of the spectrum. And they'll get defensive. They might shout and they might blame everybody, and they might be quite aggressive and violent, if they're at school or at college. So there are many different behavior characteristics which can represent a traumatic child.
Now, would you say that the healing for, like, let's say someone is the victim of sexual abuse and they develop an eating disorder, do you think that there's any difference in the approach toward recovery versus someone who doesn't have that trauma background?
Yeah, absolutely. So the differences in recovery would be probably, it depends on the extent of the trauma. Like for me, I had quite a few different circumstances of abuse as I was getting older into my adulthood as well. Lasted up until the age of 34. I just kept getting different perpetrators coming in, adding to my traumatic experiences, which meant it took me quite a while to heal. I'd say a decade. And I'd say, I'm still healing
Sure.
because, I get triggered. Different
Yeah,
circumstances will trigger me. Whereas for
sure.
whereas for somebody who's probably only had the one incident of a traumatic experience, it could be a bit faster, because then it's that one episode that you're dealing with as compared to somebody who's had like dozens. Mm.
Right. There's something to be said about, acute trauma versus chronic trauma.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. And how about with yourself then, when it comes to you know, the eating disorders and recovery?
You know, and I'm very candid about this. Like, even if you're an intuitive eating coach,
Yeah.
you have days that just stink. And you
Mm.
know, a lot of the times you can journal and meditate and self-talk your way out of it. And some days you can't, like, and they're very few and far between. But I was very candid with my audience couple months ago where I was like, you know, I had a really bad day. I felt
Yeah.
very out of control and I knew it. And I was fighting with myself to step on the scale. And I did. And I was,
Oh.
yeah. And it was like I was almost more upset that I did that for the sake of my audience, because like, how can I do that when I tell other people not to do that? But you know
Oh,
what?
bless you.
We're all human, man. And
Hey, exactly.
sometimes it freaking happens. And you know what?
Um,
I got over it. It was
oh,
over in a day. I slept on it,
good.
fine the next day. But you know, no matter if it's coming, so your issue with food is never about food. I don't
No.
care who you are, even the people who are like, no, 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 I'm addicted to sugar. No, there's
Mm,
something else going on. You have a deeper something that needs to be healed.
yeah.
And whether it's sexual trauma or it's this other need for you know, I always say I use an acronym SALVE, like a salve you
Mm,
would put on a wound. You
yeah.
are looking for safety, acceptance, love, or validation.
Okay. I love
And
that.
it should be
Yeah.
external. That's the E, right? So the
Yeah.
safety, acceptance, love, and validation, those are the things we seek.
Yeah.
And you did not get that in some capacity in your
Mm,
formative years, and you are making up for it now by either not eating enough, manipulating your body, overeating,
yeah.
binging, purging, whatever the case may be. So you
Yeah.
have to, no matter if it's sexual abuse or not, you have to dig into that why, and you have to heal whatever internal ish
Yeah.
is going on here.
True, it's true. And for some people, it could be quite difficult to even get to that root of the issue. They don't know. And this is where self-awareness comes in.
Right.
Being self-aware is huge. Yeah.
And you know, that could, you know, to be self-aware, maybe you need to meditate, maybe you need to journal, but you
Mm,
need to, maybe you need to find a therapist, but you need to find a way to sit with yourself. And I think that's
yeah.
really hard for a lot of people, because I don't think a lot of people like themselves.
Yeah, we are. We're our worst critics, aren't we? Oh,
Worse, worse. And like,
yeah.
I would consider, even though I have, you know, one-off days once in a blue moon, I would consider myself recovered, but I am a
Yeah.
recovering perfectionist. That is
I
still something,
like that.
that's a journey I'm on, man.
That's,
And it's
yeah.
hard because you're right. I'm my worst critic. Like, I will far
We
and away say things to myself in my mind that I would never say to anybody else. And you know, it's something I teach my audience, and I'm teaching myself, and I'm a forever learner. So like, I'm with my community in that with
Oh.
them right now. So
Oh, I love
yeah.
that. That is, yeah, we are, honestly, we're so hard on ourselves. And you just think, come on, you know, just look at yourself in the mirror and just think, wow, you're badass.
Yes,
When do we
yes.
say this to ourselves?
Well, that's the thing. Like, we have these neural connections in our brain, and they are created through repetition. So if you keep
Mm,
telling yourself the same story, that pathway is going to get stronger. But if you start telling
yeah.
yourself a different story, like you're badass, that connection is going to
Yeah.
weaken, and a new one is
Like,
going to be
what's
formed.
going on? Yeah, it's going to question what is going on here. Awkward. You know?
Yes, and also, like, I always, and God, this is kind of morbid, but kind of great. Like, I always think to myself, it's like, Alana, you're gonna die. Like, one day,
Yeah.
this is gonna be like, you will cease to be.
Yeah.
This will be over. Are you really gonna spend the whole time worried
Yeah.
that, you know, you didn't do this right with your toddler, or didn't eat that correct meal,
Yeah.
or didn't do whatever? Like, it's just like, it's not gonna matter. So why are you beating yourself up about it so much? Like, just be easy on yourself.
Yes, self-care, lovelies.
Yes, sure,
Oh, yeah.
sure.
So I think, yeah, key message here is that we need to love ourselves more in whichever way it takes for people to love themselves, whether that is through communicating with a loved therapist or a coach, you know, whatever you choose to have in terms of a support and acknowledgement partner, or, you know, whether it's just going out with your friends and having a good time, or just having that bath, that lovely warm bath with some candles and a glass of wine. Just look after yourselves.
Yes. And it doesn't matter what, it doesn't have to be this like image of the girl with the yoga mat and her green screen. It doesn't have
doing
to be
handstands.
it could be gardening, it could be crocheting, it could be anything that just allows you to just be and replenish.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Yeah,
Flew by. Like I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, what just
I know.
I have like an ending question that
Oh,
everybody, so I'll give that to you, and then if you have anything to wrap up with me, we'll do
cool.
that.
Let's do it.
I always, since this is called Finally Free, I always ask everybody, what to you does it mean to be finally free?
For me, finally free means authenticity. It means just me being my authentic self, not having to be somebody whom I'm not, which I spent majority of my life being, as a form of a protective barrier, which they call it ego as well. But finally, I can be vulnerable.
Good.
I love it.
That's
yeah. Awesome. Wow. And how about for you? I just want to know if you have any regrets in your life up until date.
Honestly, no, nothing big anyway, just because, even the eating disorder, I mean, yes, of course, I kind of wish that I never put myself through that, but at the same time, it's created this passion that I have for what I do with my intuitive eating community. And I make an impact on people's lives, and I love that. And it gave me a sense of purpose. So I really can't regret that.
Exactly. Absolutely. This is the path that it's brought you on, and this is you're out there adding value and changing people's lives, and that's the greatest gift ever.
Yeah. Thank you. Same to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, doing an amazing job, Alana.
Thank you too.
Wow, it's been awesome having this conversation. And again, what I will do on my podcast platform and my YouTube is I'll add some links where you can contact Alana, and you can follow her on her Instagram page, and her make sure you don't miss any of her future talks. And and I guess for your guests as well, you'll do the same.
I will do the same. Yep, everything for Anu will be on the show notes, and then when we start promoting this episode, I'll put everything up there too, so people can find you.
See
and
on that.
Victim to Victor. I love that name. Victim to Victor.
We are though, aren't we?
We are. Well, that's exactly what I was just saying. Like, that's why I don't regret it. I went from being a victim to being a victor for other people.
This is it. Absolutely. Yeah. And watch this space, universe, because we are on our way. Thank you everyone for listening to this. As always, you're amazing. We love you and can't wait for the next episode. So take care, my friends. Ciao.